Welcome. We are so happy to have you with us today, those of you who are here in person and those of you who are joining us by Zoom. What a wonderful, strange world we live in that we can have so many audience members. We're here today for Conversations with Kamwenge. We're so honored to have some of the artists from the Kamwenge workshop with us. In conjunction with the exhibition Working Together, the photographers of the Kamwenge workshop, which is on view in our galleries until October 9th. I do hope you'll have a chance to see the show. We want to begin by acknowledging that we are on the unceded ancestral lands of the Gabrielino Tongva people, and with such respect for their stewardship, history, and ongoing presence on this land of ours, of theirs. For those of you joining us by Zoom, closed captioning is available. You'll see a CC button on your Zoom bar, and you can click that to toggle closed captioning on or off. For those of you with us in person, this is your opportunity to be free of technology for a sweet, sweet moment. So please silence your cell phones. What a wonderful chance to get to see images and hear from people. So it's a gift to have our cell phones off. We will have a Q&A session. For those of you who are joining us by Zoom, you can use the Q&A box, and those questions will come to our moderator. And for those of you in person, we have some wonderful guest services assistants here waving, Talia and Hannah, and they'll each have a microphone. So if you have a question towards the end of the session, raise your hand and they'll come to you with a microphone, and that'll enable the rest of us to get to hear what you're wondering about, and if there's any issues, our moderator will repeat the question for the panelists and for those joining us by Zoom. I want to acknowledge that there are some photographers who aren't with us today. That is Buford, Danny, and Sean, so we say hello to them. And for the rest of you, I should say that these panels are being recorded, and so they will be available probably within the next few weeks on YouTube. So you're welcome to see this conversation again. So grateful to have with us today Laron Brooks, my colleague from the Getty Research Institute, where he is Associate Curator of Modern and Contemporary Collections. All sorts of cool stuff. He's bringing such wonderful works into the Getty Research Institute collections, and we're honored to have him here today. He'll be in conversation with three of the Kamwenge photographers, Adger Cowens, Herbert Randall, and Mink Smith. So please join me in welcoming them to the stage today.
Thank you, Maisie. That was really very, very gracious. And thank you, everyone, for being here this afternoon. And I want to say thank you, Ming, Herbert, Adger, for being here and willing to discuss your work and your life as artists. And I say artists, and it's just not just photographers, but it's artists, right? We'll get further into that. To begin with, I'll just begin by showing you some of their work. Some of you who are not familiar with their work, I'm just going to show you, and here we begin with Adger.
I love that.
I mean, I would like to go through this very simply, but to pass over some of this is just, you know, kind of the wrong thing to do when you look at something like this. Where were you, Adger, when this is photographed?
I was living in Harlem. I had just gotten out of the Navy. This is 1961, and I had a Leica camera that my aunt got me when I graduated from school. Mm-hmm. And my wife was working, and I was home. I had nothing to do. I'm eating sardines and crackers, and I'm looking out the window and shooting snow scenes, and I see this guy maybe a few steps back, and I just thought it was a great picture with him looking down. I kind of waited, and for the timing to him to get to that point where I thought it said everything I wanted to say.
Yeah. So you're at home, right? So what's so interesting is that, you know, you're at home and people just, in just a mundane day, right?
Yeah,
and you just happen to,
day, yeah.
a regular day.
A regular day. I just had breakfast, and I was thinking, what am I going to have for lunch? And I'm sitting in the window with my camera thinking, and I was going to shoot just the cars with the snow because it was so beautiful. And the snow was coming down very lightly, and I look down and I see this guy coming. And he's walking on the sidewalk. He's not walking in the middle of the street. And when he got to the first car there on the bottom left, he turned and walked into the street. I thought I was going to get a shot of him walking down by the car, but he turned and walked into the street, and it was just a perfect shot.
Yeah. And that's the power. When I say artists, this is what I mean, that all of you are artists. You know, people tend to think, well, it's also the power of photography, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not holed up in a studio like a painter, right? You're not holed up in a studio thinking about, you know, 3D necessarily forms like a sculptor. You can actually have the means by which your artistry can go through, the vehicle for your artistry, the camera, you said the Leica, right? Next to you, and then between breakfast and lunch, you're looking out the window, right? But then it's a matter of the eye.
Yeah.
And each of you have a very powerful sense of presence and paying attention to the moment, right? It's being in the moment.
In the moment is very important.
Yeah. It's almost like a meditation, being in the moment that, you know, you had breakfast, you're looking out the window, and then there's that thing. Because you said you watched him walk.
Yes.
You watched him walk, and you knew, it's almost like an instinct.
I knew it was going to be a good picture. There's a shot before that when he's stepping out into the street. That's nice too. But the timing of this particular shot at that particular moment said everything that I was feeling. You know, I always talk about feeling because that's what I learned. That a photograph, you take pictures, you know, with your heart, not with your eyes. Your eyes see, but it's the heart that feels. And that's what you try and, you know, convey. All my students and teachers, that's what I taught, is that, you know, you have to rehearse with your camera enough so that it becomes second nature to you, so that you don't have to look down and see the f-stop and this, that. And in those days, you're shooting native. This is not digital. So you only had 36 shots. You had to be very, very selective.
Had to move with intention. Right. I mean, I think that's something that people, in an age of digital photography, to move with intention, to take pictures with intention. You said 36 shots. And then you have to take the film out, and then you have to protect that film, and then you have to go and get the fix and develop it. And so it's a part of a longer process photography, and each of you are a master at it. And so, you know, I mean, that's so important, the heart, intention, both of those.
I mean, for instance, in this shot, you know, Betty Shabazz coming out of Malcolm X's funeral. And they were coming out the side door, and I just happened to be there that day. It was right around the corner from where I lived. And I see this guy with the camera to the left was a union guy, and I saw him. He said, "What are you doing, man?" I said, "Let me in there. I'm a union guy," because they were keeping me out. And I took my camera, took a couple of shots, and I ran out of film. I was like, oh. You know, and I loaded the other roll of film in just as she walked up to the door. Talk about waiting and timing, and you know, so I got that shot, and the cop turned to look. It was all perfect. There are 3 shots, but this is the one that says everything, with the news camera guy on the left, and the cop looking, and her coming out. You know, with Percy Sutton.
You know, I want everyone in here with your iPhones, your cameras, think about limiting your photos to 36 shots. Think about all the pictures you take, every time you press the button, and all the images that you take. Think about limiting your shots to 36. And what would your images look like if you had to take photographs with that much intention? Because, you know, what you said, that you ran out of film. You ran out of film, and so what is that like? You have to go into your bag or go into your pocket. I mean, it's a whole process, right?
Yes.
Go into your pocket, open it up, not...
Rewind first. You know, and then hope that when you put the next roll in, it doesn't catch. Sometimes you had to be very careful to make sure that it was flat.
Yeah.
Sometimes it would catch, and you'd have to start all over again.
Start over again.
Oh, it's timing. It's nerve-wracking, really. But you have to pay attention.
It doesn't look that way, though.
Oh, no.
See, yeah.
If I could overlay what I was doing at the time, it would be funny. It would be like a cartoon. I'm looking at this image now.
Yeah, and so when you go see the show, everyone, when you go see the show, look at each image in that show with this kind of understanding. Look at each particular image in their show with that particular understanding that it's 36 shots and they are taking these images with intention, right? Now, the effects in these images speaks to their artistic styles. And I was saying to you guys, it felt like I was looking at a band. Mm-hmm. You know, walking through the exhibition, it felt like I was looking at the image of people who knew each other, who were playing a song, but differently. Someone's on drums, someone has a saxophone, someone has, Herb, right, yeah, you know, and so something like this, right? And so for me, seeing those, the light, there's a time of day you're capturing here mm-hmm. too, right? Mm-hmm. You want to speak about?
Yeah, the light was moving when I first walked in the house. This is the house, I call this Mama's Piano. And this is what was on the piano, Ebony Magazine and the song. And when I first walked in the house, because my mother had passed, and I had to come in the house and do some things, and my uncle called me, and I went there, and I was weeping because my mother had passed, and this was her piano. Now that trumpet, I played trumpet for years, is on the end of the piano, and then the family people, you know, my brother and my sister, and I'm on the end, and my brother when he joined the Army, and my cousin. And I thought, this is what our house was about. My mother played the piano, and it was Ebony Magazine. You know, we got Ebony Magazine when it first came, you know, we were right there, Ebony and Jet Magazine. Those were, you know, like Life and Look. You know, we had, you know, Jet Magazine and Ebony. So this is what my mother's house looked like. And so I raised the curtains on the blinds and opened them to bring that little bit of light in there to make that whole picture work.
We're not crying anymore, right? No. I'm about to, you know, no one's crying, right, with me, because that really touched me.
Look.
Yeah.
I was showing this picture down south.
Yeah.
And this white guy walked up to me. He said, "I love that picture." I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You know why?" He said, "It reminds me of my family and my mama's piano." And I thought, then it's universal, you see. And that's the idea. I mean, when I'm taking pictures, I'm thinking beyond anything except, will this picture last through time? You know, that's the most important thing to me. Have I got enough of my emotion into it that it speaks without me having to say or write anything about it? You know, I studied, you know, at Ohio University, and I always hated the photojournalism class because everybody was writing underneath the pictures. And I thought the photographs should say everything.
And it's the heart that translated to that man who saw the pictures. It's the heart, you know. I mean, it's so deeply personal photography.
Yeah.
You know, like
it's still universal in the sense this guy identified with it. It's from another realm. You know? I never thought that when I took this picture that a person like that would identify with that photograph.
And when you said Ebony, you know, I think about my parents and Ebony, and we had Essence, and we had Ebony Jr., then we had Jet, just laying around, you know, and just think about the material culture of the home and how, I mean, for me, I think about, I just took that for granted that these things were there.
Yeah.
And then you would sum that up into a photograph to say that this actually should not be taken for granted because it meant home, it meant family, it meant the kinds of environments that are made for us to grow up in.
I mean, bless his house. I mean, it's dog-eared. I mean, my mother, she played it over and over again. She was, you know, she was a piano player, but amateur. You know? She was an amateur photographer, too. But that just spoke to how many times she had played that.
Yeah. Ooh, man, it's powerful. But it speaks to kind of a bravery there, too, to actually allow the world, allow us to see it. Thank you. Yeah. time of day, being in the moment, being present, having your camera. You want to speak to this? Herbert?
Time of day, I had no idea what time of day it was. This is 1964 in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, in a time or something that's was called Freedom Summer. I called it a number of other things, but I don't know if you want to. I was photographing what was called, I don't remember what it was called, but it was freedom schools where children were taught, where black children were taught things like things that they should have known and they were never taught. There was a rainy day. The classes were generally held in churches. And so all of these kids had to come together in one church. It had a fairly large basement, and there was a lot of kids in there. But kids tended to be very respectful, and but there was still a lot of noise in the basement. And I saw this. I was in the back of the room, and I just saw this young boy sitting on the steps, but from a long distance. So I approached him. And with all of the organized confusion that was in the basement, this boy was sitting on those steps in that, of course, in that pose, and in a kind of serenity with all of this organized chaos going on, and it just spoke to me, and I photographed him. Yeah.
This is a very, human kind of interaction. This kind of photography, to approach someone or to see someone, it's a very human-to-human kind of thing, a person-to-person kind of, interaction, but it's also a lot of respect in this image.
I hope so.
Yeah, because a young black man, and you said he's being exposed to things that he should have learned. You want to unravel that a little bit? What, like, things they should have learned during Freedom Summer? Like, what, yeah.
Some of the things that they should have learned. One experience, I photographed a lot of the classrooms, and of course, listened to what was going on between students and teachers. One specific class, there was a young boy who I don't remember the particular interaction, but the teacher asked, I think, a question, and the young boy replied, "Oh, that couldn't be." And so the teacher said, well, what do you mean it couldn't be? The teacher was talking to the children about African civilizations and various aspects of African civilizations. And this is what the child didn't understand. The child said, well, that couldn't be. Well, it came out, this kid said, well, in the Tarzan movies that I've seen, and he didn't articulate it particularly that way, but his frame of references were Tarzan and Jungle Jim or whatever. That was his idea of African civilizations. So anyhow, there was a dialogue between the teacher and the young boy, and it went on for a while. The little boy started crying. The teacher started crying. I started crying. And so I couldn't, but I wasn't there to cry. I was there to take photographs of this stuff. So I heard you and talking about Ebony, Jet, now of course Adja. These children, this is 1964, they had never seen Ebony or Jet magazine. They didn't know what that was. Ebony did send, some magazines down to Mississippi, but these kids had never seen that. Had no idea about things like that. Anyhow, so I'm getting back, I forget what the original question was.
No, I mean, you're describing you
great.
being in a situation where it's really a revolution for America to live up to democratic principles that it promised. Freedom Summer was when young people from around the country went to Mississippi, went down south to risk their lives so that it's a human rights issue and it's a civil rights issue, but it's also an issue in which we're trying to make democracy live up to its promises. The children of the enslaved in this country trying to move forward, trying to vote, trying to be treated as human beings, trying to live the American dream. But within that context, you have people who have been abused and who don't know their own history. So when you say Africa, so of course, my parents grew up in segregated Alabama. And so they know exactly that reality of not having any kind of prideful presence about who they were, nor their ancestry. Yeah. And so for you to be there firsthand, it's a powerful experience because it's not like it's a photography. This is the nature of photography. You're there. You're a witness. And beyond that witnessing, you have to use your camera to actually capture that particular moment by which we here in 2022 are back in 1964 in Mississippi. This is the potential of what you guys were doing. This is not the potential. This is the reality of what you guys were doing in your own specific ways because it's a very daring endeavor because you were vulnerable to what they were vulnerable to.
Yes, sir.
There was no helicopter dropping you in and taking you out. You rolled the roads. You ate where they ate. Do you want to describe that feeling of being in it?
I'm giggling, but it wasn't at all funny. I don't think I had, this is 1964, I was 28 years old. I don't think I had ever, I had never been south before. And so it was quite an experience for me. And in terms of the food, well, I'm not here to talk about the food, but of course, I was brought up, you say, oh, thank you, and the food was meager, and so, well, I'm not going to talk about the food, but although I had never been south, and certainly, well, actually, no, I had never been south before, and so it was an experience. However, there was a commonality, me being from the north and whatever. I mean, it wasn't like strangers. These were like my family. I mean, this is family, and so there's one experience that I had. When I got to Mississippi, I was taken to the house where I stayed in for my family for 2 months. And they said, Herbert, here, this is your room. This is the bedroom. and I thanked them. And I did not realize, for 2 or 3 years later, I didn't realize that this was the mother and father's bedroom. This was the main bedroom. They all slept in a small room. I didn't know it at the time. They all, the mother, the father, and I think there was their son and a little boy. They slept in a small room so I could have. I didn't know it because I would not have, I'll take the room or take wherever. I didn't realize that until a couple of years later. And I'm not answering your question.
Oh, you are. You are.
But we were family. I mean, there was a difference, I suppose, in terms of geography, but I didn't answer your question.
Herbert, so sometimes people say I have a Southern accent and I'm raised in Queens.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right, so there are things that translate.
Yeah.
There are things that translate, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you being able to see this young man at a moment of epiphany is part of that translation as well, because you saw his humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was the next one.
This is Lower East Side, New York City, Manhattan. And in the 1970s, I just had a long discussion with Maisie about this photograph, but I won't go into that. But I used to walk down by the river there, and these children, well, these kids, they used anything they could as a playground, I suppose. There's a trucking, and I think someone had just lent me, Ray Francis had just lent me his camera. Ray is no longer with us, but anyhow, again, I just approached this. I saw these kids playing, and there are some things that I can't really explain because everything happened so quickly, or everything happened so quickly which very often happens. And so now I'm left to explain it, which I cannot do.
Yeah.
But I saw these kids getting into this truck, playing into this truck. And at that moment, the first child that's entering first, that is what I wanted. But then there was some kind of freaky light coming, and so I had to raise the camera a bit. But all of these are just really split seconds, and so I'm trying to explain something that I really can't explain. But it was there. That's what I wanted.
Yeah.
That is it. That's the image.
Miles Davis said, I think people know this quote. They said, how would you describe your sound?
Yeah.
He said,
Yeah.
how can I?
Yeah.
I mean, it is, underneath the unsaid is just years of mastery and training.
Yeah.
So sometimes when it's just fluid that way, you both, you're just fluid that way, there is no really explaining in detail. There is that feeling, there's that sort of instinct, there's that intuition. Mm-hmm. And as you said you saw the light, you saw the first kid.
Yeah.
You were on the walk. All of these things are accounted for. And then there's being able to get that photograph, the mastery of the camera to then get that photograph and get those shapes and see those kids on a walk. Mm. And so being out on a walk, just to be responsive to the environment, to look left and look right and see these kids and know that there's something going to be there. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's How could you explain? Like, how could it's that thing, and the photographers in this room, you know there's that thing. And similarly, right? I mean, how this here, witnessing people, seeing people, maybe trying to guess what they're going to do next, seeing that there's a shape there, right? And then you see the graffiti or the writing, and then you see the body taking on a similar kind of curve-like form. And so both are sort of wed right there. The drawing on the wall to the shape of the body, then to the oval that he's sort of standing on, circle, circle, circle.
It all happens. It all happens in such a short period of times, but in that short period of time is like a lifetime in a sense, and it's all there. It's all there. The writing that's on those boards, I was not quite sure of, but I just had included that in the frame, and I can't explain the seconds. I mean, I can't do that. It all comes together.
You know, Herbert, it feels like reading a book. Like every time you put it down, then you pick it up a few years later, you see more things.
Yeah.
You know? And so looking at this, every time I look at it, I see something else. And so there's a ton of information in this. And sometimes the mind just senses that. But again, we're talking about mastery. Now, you know, when I walk around, you know, I don't necessarily look at puddles per se, but to look at a puddle or look at a body of water and to see in that body of water the potential for there to be a photograph when you see the light, right? Hit it right there to know that. And what's interesting about Kamonge is that you guys saw this like you saw this and you know that this was not denotative photojournalism. You knew that this was art. You knew that when you got together and you discussed these photographs, you were discussing this kind of work with other artists. And for me, that is just amazing that this supportive and competitive, right, group, right? Good things come from competition too, right? That's a supportive and competitive group that you brought something like this. You were walking, you saw a body of water on the ground, and you saw light, the sun flash in that water, and the other elements in there, and made this photograph, which seems to, I mean, it's abstract, but it is the world. And you brought it amongst your peers, and everyone said, they had the comment, but at the end of the day, it's still art. That kind of validation for me, just knowing that was there for you guys, for each other, is just something that is really something that's special. So, I mean, not even, you know, sometimes I think we don't even have to describe it, we just have to feel it. You know, and that's the biggest part of art, is feeling it, is having empathy for the thing, for the people, for the kinds of images, even for the artist himself. Let's move on a little bit. Harlem, Ming? And what is this Linux? Or Frederick Douglass?
It's, what's the name?
It's Sunday, we know that.
Yeah, it's Sunday.
It's Sunday.
It's in front of the building with,
I'm Clayton Powell.
what's the name of it?
Yeah. You know, Ming, you're walking around. You're walking around, Ming, and then
125th
125th?
Street, after church
After church.
on a Sunday.
Look at those hats.
I just want to say something.
Yeah.
When I first came to Kamonge and Adger and you were there, it was like I'm feeling right now the way I felt my first day. Because, like, Adger, he was like, you said that Kamonge was like a band, and Adger was always the rock star. I mean, he came in with red velvet pants on. He'd go straight to the refrigerator, what you got to eat, and, you know, and he walked a certain way, and, you know, he was talking all this, and he was like what they said, you know, and, but very good energy. And Herbie, this is the most I've ever heard you talk, because we were we were always in this group, and we were the quiet ones, right?
Yes, we were.
We'd always, someone would say something about a photograph, and then Herbie and I would look. And we didn't say anything, like our way, so, but I used to dream to be able to take photographs like you. And I always say that to him, because it's like that last photograph, last evening when I saw this, I told Mingus, look at this. These are masterpieces. And this show, I saw more of the work in the show. I had never experienced this work. I had never seen Herman Howard's work.
Yes.
It's beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
And I was like, wow. And I only saw him once. But I knew he died in Central Park, and I go to Central Park a lot, especially during the pandemic. And I always think about Herman Howard, how he died, right after he had ran in the park, right? So I just wanted to say that, the generosity of Komangi's spirit, the integrity, the authenticity. We came from a period that was the Black Panthers, and the Black Arts came out of the Black Panther movement. It's the sister movement. Amiri Baraka, we wanted to change our story, to say our story. And as these were artists, they're just not documentarians. They were artists speak, the painters, the poets that I met, the writers, the playwrights. It comes from your heart, and it's like expressing what's going on in your time, in your life, and it's personal. And they made art of it. We just didn't, it came out of that, but we studied the masters. We talked, like, I loved Versailles. I love, John Sarkowski, who was at MoMA. He always talked about, or as I read something about him, because he was at that time the foremost curator in the world, that art is something that comes from yourself. You're really, August Wilson, he talks about, he writes for the same people that Picasso painted for, and that's the self, and in that, you express. So, like, even with doing art, I just want to say it comes from within. It's a journey within. It's not like trying to, get that conversation is within yourself. And being an artist, being acknowledged, not being acknowledged, making money, not making money, all those different conflicts that go on with you. It's basically like the doing of it, like the joy of being able to create and then say, see something, because it's it's almost mystical, like trying to get that moment, like in time, like Adria was like, I just happened to be passing by and Betty Shabazz was there, or these kids, but it was, you saw or felt, and I think it's spirit that puts you in that place to take that moment. You have to have your skills, and just like how a gymnast practice or basketball, they have their chops, or musicians, you work on those skills, but then you go out and you do whatever it is, if you play the music or you photograph. So I just wanted to really say that.
That was good.
And I think a lot of people do take for granted that there's an immense amount of study that goes into what you do. You look at painters, you look at photographers, you listen to music, you read poetry, The environment that you guys were in was a really interesting environment in that, like you said, I mean, coming off the Black Panthers, coming off this moment in which, Black people were trying to gain autonomy within this democracy, right? And then you guys are the poets, the visual poets. You guys are the visual musicians. And using print culture to really bring an image to, I would say, Black presence to our community that we hadn't really seen before. So when you guys got together, I love that little intimate moment with you and Herbert, like you in the group. You guys were just having your own, conversations amongst the larger conversations, because listen, in a group this big that you guys are in a group that big, you have really different kinds of personalities, but everyone is there for a purpose, right? Everyone is there for a purpose. And even if you don't get along with somebody, you still can feel a kindred with what they do and who they are. And so, I think it's really kind of profound that in this exhibition, you are seeing someone's work really kind of for the first time that was in that group, Maybe it takes years and distance to actually see someone, right? And so within that context, do you want to talk about how you came to the group, Ming?
Okay. I was on a go-see, and so they had like a little foyer at Barboza was the studio. And I heard the Barboza and another photographer. You couldn't see them, but I heard them, and they were talking, they were debating on photography. Was it just a, nostalgia, or was it really an art form? Because it wasn't considered an art form during those times. And that's when I heard, and then afterwards, I met Barboza. He saw my portfolio, and I asked him something about the photography, because I had photographed ever since I was, I'm 5 years old. I borrowed my mother's Brownie and took photographs of my kindergarten class. And, so photography, this was always something like my father did it. I had uncles that did it, but it was mainly like mechanical. It was very machine. It wasn't. I didn't really feel it at that. It was, they would talk about this camera and that camera, and technically, and I'm not real machines and things like that. I like to draw, or I like to paint. I like to use my hands. So it wasn't something that I was prone to, but I liked taking photographs. And I loved looking at photographs, like albums, looking at pictures, like, I remember looking and seeing photographs, and if I could see my grandmother in the photograph, or I could see faces, I could see me, and, it was always, even when I was little, there was a photograph drawing, and they had done some drawings, and it was my mother and my aunt. And this picture, everywhere you looked, this picture was still looking at you. I was fascinated by it. But so images, and so when I first joined Kumangi, or Barboza had introduced me to some of the members, and the first meeting, it was like I found a home. They were authentic. They were authentic Black people to me. It was like, Sean, I remember him saying, yeah, man, all the kids in my neighborhood, and he grew up, he was one of the ones that were from Harlem, said, they're all gone. So they were gone before they went to college or high school, And I was like, wow, because coming from Ohio, it wasn't quite like that. But that was how I first joined Kumangi.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting to find kindred like that, to take photographs. I just wanted to not let this go by. You took photos of your kindergarten.
Yeah, the Black kids in my kindergarten class. There was about 6 of them, right? So I took pictures.
Right. I mean, that's walking toward something, you know, that's really walking toward a talent. Sometimes you just have that talent that's sitting there that you've done naturally all this time, and then you meet other people who do that, all right? And so, you know, Andrew, you walk in, she knew your pants. You walk in, did your presence, you know, and then you know, I just love the sort of camaraderie here, and I just love the friendship you guys have. I mean, till this day, and to walk through that exhibition, I definitely saw that friendship, you know. I mean, this is so powerful and could have happened in an instance, but here, you know, the American flag, you know, it's like stars and stripes, you know, America seen through stars and stripes, but seen through black women, it's compressed against this, you know, the flags there, you know, what is America to me, almost, you know? And to be able to walk down the street and to see something like this, because it's so layered, you see the people in the background, the car, all right? And so the foreground, middle ground, and background, it's really a compressed image. And to get that clear reflection in the glass, it's really, really difficult to do. How did you, you know, so you went from that little Brownie. What camera were you using? Or
Yeah, it was a Brownie. And then in college, I used a 2 1/4 because someone lent me the camera. I took one class, and first of all, my high school, what do you call, well, anyway, it was like a teacher. He told me that I shouldn't go to college, that the only thing I would do, only job I would be able to have is to scrub floors or, you know, and this is, you know, this is how I grew up. You know, it was maybe different because this was a white school, it was changing influx, and there were old school teachers, there were no black teachers, and he was very old school, and meaning the white establishment. It was changing neighborhood. I remember, well, let's see, so I'm getting off the topic, but
yeah, the camera.
what was it? Oh, the camera,
Yeah,
2 1/4.
2 1/4.
Yeah, I used the 2 1/4 and then the 35 millimeter. And I loved the 35 millimeter because it was fast and it was small, and, you know, and they used they used 35 millimeter and it was fast. And then I do a lot of lighting where it's dark, and so I could get fast film to be able to capture it. And so that became kind of, you know, a little bit of my style, you know. But I always liked taking photographs with the Brownie camera. When after my mother passed, we were, you know, dividing up all the belongings, and there was a box. It was a Kodak box, and it had Ming on it. And I opened it up, and there were some contact sheets that I had taken in college, and also some photos that I had taken in the 3rd grade that I had completely forgotten about. And it was of 3 of my girlfriends in front of we had an outing, in Columbus, and it was commemorating, it was a class trip. And so, you know, photographs, they serve for my memory, you know, memory. It brings back all kinds of things that you don't remember.
Yeah, it's really powerful to have that kind of, to have that kind of power, to say that you ran into yourself, right? You opened that box and you ran into yourself, you know?
After my mother had been complaining, oh boy, all these photographs, and then it just meant so much to me because she, you know, was always complaining. She couldn't understand what I was doing with my life. You know, taking photographs. There was, you know, there wasn't any money. There wasn't any love, you know, or any kind of, you know, real conversation for me after a point. So, but I don't know. I always just think that it was spirit that's kept on leading me to one thing after the other. It was just really spirit.
Yeah. And you know, what does the life of an artist mean? You know, Andrew, you said sardines.
Well,
Right?
we would buy we buy film before we pay the rent. We'd run around the landlord and dodge it for weeks, you know, till we got some money. But if we ain't got any money, we buy film first. Dedicated to the image. That came first.
I think that needs to be said. What kind of dedication there?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
Film before rent.
Yes.
You know, and so Ming, you bring up, you know, the sort of inglorious kind of years sometimes, right? The ways in which, you know, artists aren't paid for their work, the ways in which artists, you know, you make this incredible work, but, you know, you still have to do these odd jobs, or you still are maybe, you know, scrounging for ends, and then, you know, you say, well, hey, between eating sardines, I made a masterpiece.
But
Well, I
you
didn't
don't think of it
like,
though.
quite like that. My wife had when are you going to get a job? You know, I mean, you know, you got to pay the rent. This is taking pictures. I mean, when I went to school to study photography at Ohio University, and I had a grant, a scholarship in music. I started in music. And that summer, I didn't know what I really wanted to do when I got out of high school. And my sister's boyfriend had a magazine that said, Ohio University gives degree in photography. And I showed it to my mother. Oh, she was an amateur photographer. She said, well, we got to show it to your father. And so when he came home, she said, honey, he wants to go and study photography. He said, that's a hobby. What are you talking about? You better get a job. That's a hobby. And it was at that time. It wasn't considered, you know, a vocation or a job. It was a hobby. It was, you know, you couldn't afford to buy the film, first of all, or have a decent camera. It was too expensive. I mean, cameras at the time were $150, but that was a lot of money. You know, in the 50s, I'm talking about, you know, 50s. I got out of, you know, high school in 1954. So at that time, there were no books on photographers or photography. There was no Nikkor tanks. There was no high-speed film. You know, I learned developing film by, you know, clip on this side and clip on that side in the dark, going like that, and hoping that you got the right exposure. It had a green light you turn on and see if you had something, and then you put it in the developer. Yeah. It was a whole different thing, but the excitement of shooting a picture, developing the film, and making a print. When that print came up, and he was like, wow. You know, I mean, I was a darkroom junkie.
Yeah.
You know, I was in the darkroom all the time. And you never know what time it is, because time is passing like that. But you're so involved in this image, you know, thing, and watching it and watching it. Just magic. It takes you over. It's, you know, and I think it's that kind of dedication that you have to have in order to bridge that gap. You know, it's your commitment, but it's what you're drawn to, what your energy is drawn to, and I think that's, you know, the dedication part of it is something that you want to do. If you're a musician or doctor, lawyer, anything, it's that whole energy that drives you to do that, regardless of what other people think you should do. You know, it's what you do, and it's what you love to do.
Yeah, it's almost like you're making pictures in the dark two different ways, right? Culturally, you say you want to be a photographer, and then, you know, especially at that time, to be an African American, that, you know, especially when you say, you know, in the 50s, what does it mean to be a professional photographer? Who's out there at that particular moment? You know, I guess Gordon Parks was, I mean, he was taking pictures for life, I guess, in the mid-40s. Right, but you said, like, who's out there that looks like me, that's doing what I do, that I can show people that this is a valid, right? This is a valid life, that this is a valid life, and it actually giving pride and eventually make some money, right? But you're kind of in the dark, right? So you have to be that example, and then you're quote unquote fighting these wars, right? To say that what I'm doing is something that is making a cultural contribution. You know, I look at this picture here, Ming. And you're in the mix. I mean, this is in the 80s, but you know, you're in the cultural mix. You know, Sun Ra, and you guys are around all of these creative people in all of these different kinds of art forms, and you know yourself that what you're doing is important, but you said yesterday, Herb, that you said you looking at the Getty outside that you didn't think the work would be somewhere like this. To me,
No.
yesterday. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no. I mean, no.
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be ridiculous. What, are you crazy?
I mean, it is something to say that you got that together, you built enough cultural momentum to actually let the world actually see your talent, to actually, yes, it does deserve to be here and deserve to be anywhere that's better than here.
Oh, most certainly.
Right?
That I don't question at all. No, I don't
Right.
question that at all.
Because when people think about what genius is, right? Does genius mean that you make a lot of money? Does genius mean that you have a lot of cultural capital? What does genius mean? Is genius a solo endeavor, right? In the Western, tradition, genius is a matter of the Mozart, right? The great individual genius. But when you deal with, African traditions, especially African American traditions, you're dealing often with group dynamics. You're dealing with people, quilters. Think about quilters. You're dealing with group dynamics. People working together to make something, and so there's singing that's happening sometimes. There's jazz that's playing when you guys were in the meeting, right? There's different kinds of rhythms of language. All that feeds into the soul or the heart and the encouragement of what you're doing. And so for the work to be here means that you were doing something that caused a significant cultural change, especially 1970s, 80s. So my first introduction to a darkroom is I studied with Roy DeCarava at Hunter, right? He would be in the darkroom by himself playing WBGO jazz, just sitting down there with himself in the darkroom on a Tuesday night. I'm like, that's Roy DeCarava, right? It was like the world didn't know, But there he was, like you said, a darkroom junkie. Right? Mm-hmm. Someone who is addicted to the miracle that happens when you take that sheet out the fix. That kind of revelation, right, of the moment when you take the sheet out the fix and then, you begin printing. And so I was saying to you guys earlier, when I walked around the show, I thought it was a masterclass in printing. Mm-hmm. That show is a masterclass in printing. Can you describe like your individual, how you approach printing your work? I mean, because we all have digital, like we just go to like our phones.
When I was in school, the first pictures that I saw were of pictures of Edward Weston's that our teacher had. And I was like blown away because they looked three-dimensional. I'd never seen prints like that before. Mm-hmm. And that inspired me. I mean, to how to make a print like that. How do you make a print that highlights everything, So, I mean, I worked real hard to learn how to do that. I went to Ohio University. I guess I was the second black person to graduate from Ohio University in photography. Chuck Stewart was the first. He's a jazz photographer. And when I got out of school and I came to New York, I was working with Gordon, and I told him I had graduated and had a degree in photography. He said, "What's that?" I said, "I majored in photography. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts." He said, "Yeah, but what is that?" I said, "I studied photography for 4 years, And because at that time, people didn't have degrees in photography. You work with another photographer to learn photography. That's how you learn it. And they would teach you what they know, and then you would go on and take some students on, and you go on from there. Because there were no books on photography. You see that in the 50s, there were no books on the history of photography, or any books on Avedon or Penn or Rawlings or any of those people. I mean, I was lucky because my teacher, Clarence H. White Jr., his father was Clarence H. White Sr., and he was part of Stieglitz's gallery. Stieglitz is considered the father of American photography. So I was taught that tradition of seeing photography as art, as personal expression. It's what you feel. You can shoot something over and be composed nice now, but if it didn't have heart, and it didn't work, if it didn't touch somebody else, The idea was to touch somebody else, but it had to touch you first. But you had to understand that these things here were in the way, which was the camera. You had to master this thing so that if something happened, you didn't have to look at your camera and say f-stop, and you're looking, it's gone. You have to master this thing and connect your heart, this eye to your heart in here. And that's in itself is a lot of work to understand what that is, and that you have that thing, like Tony was saying before, you shoot it, and maybe you don't know until you get in the dark room and you look at the contact lens that you actually got it. But the more you do it, you know when you got it, because there's a cognition when you hit that shutter and your feelings there, and you go in the dark room and say, I got it. And that's, I think, the difference between a professional and amateur. You know when you got it, when you do it enough, you make that connection. And you have to. There's no other way. You can talk about being technically proficient. You can talk about films and the best camera and the best all that. None of that matters. It matters that you connect your heart into that. Get everything else out of the way.
Yeah. Self-work before the other work.
Oh yeah. You got to work on yourself first. You got to understand the technique. Nowadays everybody's shooting digital, click, 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 10,000 pictures. You had 36 pictures. You had to be selective. I was a hunter. I would go out in the street and I would look for things. I like the idea of capturing from life. And I, like Roy, I did not like flash. Roy did not use flash at all. You look at his picture, he hated flash. I had long discussions with him about flash. He didn't like flash at all, and he didn't like color film. He felt life was in black and white, and that's what he mastered. He mastered a very narrow light area of photography into the grays and the blacks. You look at his work, you don't see a lot of whites in his work. You see mostly gray area tones because, that's where he worked in that. But in that, he spoke universally, in that narrow band. It was very universal, everything, because it had heart, it had feeling, it had soul.
Yeah. It's like, Miles Davis played with Charlie Parker, and he, after a while, he recognized he didn't need to use all those notes. Right. And that's how he found himself. Right? And so you say, Roy had that limited, not limited, but he chose a certain spectrum.
He chose, no, he wasn't limited. He was a master in the darkroom, a master photographer. Yeah. But he chose that area to define, and it became his style, so to speak. He started as a illustrator, and he told me that he got to photography because he felt he could say more about what he felt than as an illustrator. Yeah. But he was an illustrator first.
And so style and feeling, I'm looking at this picture here of Sun Ra. It's an amazing, but it's in the moment and it's really distinct, that the contrast, some of it is, I figure in camera, but what was this moment? I mean, did you know you had it?
Pretty much, you kind of, when you have pieces when you're shooting it, like it's like a good stew or something, that this is good.
This
and
is
you'd be like shooting like crazy, right? But also about Komangi, when they asked me to go get some snacks for a meeting, right? And me, of course, so, Komangi, yeah, these were, people I looked up to. So I was going to get some snacks, and all of a sudden I heard this drumming, and it was like the Congo drum, right? And so I ran up these stairs, and 5 flights of stairs, and there was this man, he was drumming, and he was screaming and telling him, he was a real taskmaster. And then he came out when he saw me because he was looking for a new student, and so he had a paper and and he gave me a schedule of classes and said, next class was Saturday, right? So while going to pick up snacks for Comanche, I discovered Catherine Dunham. And and I've been on that quest just as much as photography. I followed like Henry Latang, the tapper, from studio to studio. He couldn't keep it going, keep the rent. He went, you know, just a lot of the black dance. That became like, this was one world, but I didn't really see, but I had also joined the dance world. And Adrian knows Ned Williams, he was my first teacher.
Yeah.
And he just passed during the pandemic. But so I learned about Catherine Dunham. I went to the camp. So I photographed a lot of, you know, dancers, and, you know, I knew the dance community. But with this photograph, one of my friends, she wanted me to go see, like, so people think, oh, I'm a jazz photographer. No, I went to accompany her because she was thinking about auditioning for Sun Ra's band, and that's why I have that photograph. It wasn't because I was going to photograph Sun Ra, you know, but of course I was, but it was really because I was going to help her, you know, accompany her, you know, make decisions about being in the Sun Ra band.
And then Masterpiece.
It was, I was saying, it's given to me. I was like, oh, you know, God gave me this because I was doing a good deed. You know.
Yeah, it's an interesting photograph because I spent a lot of time with Sun Ra, photographing Sun Ra. When I first met him on 2nd Avenue, and I went in a house with Ishmael Reed introduced me to Sun Ra. Sun Ra, the television was on, the record player was, and he had a little thumb organ that he was playing all at the same time. I said, this is a wild guy, man. He's doing all this at the same time. So this photograph, to me, speaks of the energy of Sun Ra, how wild he was. I mean, the outfits that he wore were just outrageous, you know? And the band was wild. I went to St. Paul de Vence with Sun Ra. And the audience, it was there, you know, it was a big blow-up structure. And the band came in from the back and played through the audience. Mm-hmm. It was wow. The people were like, you know, looking around. Sunrise, boom, 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 boom. It's after the end of the world. Don't you know that yet? That was just saying, you know. Mm-hmm. Mars, Jupiter, it's after the end of the world, you know. You know, it was really interesting. But Sun Ra was quite a character, and I feel, having known Sun Ra very well, that is the energy of Sun Ra. And Sun Ra's energy, and the band in the background just wailing. It's a really great shot.
It's amazing. You know, and not to let this pass, Tu Ming, the dancing helps the photography. Your ability to get into dance, your ability to study your painting, you know, I mean, everyone does something. There's something that's life-affirming that helps create something else that's life-affirming. You know, and I think just coming out of a pandemic, I think, you know, something to meditate on, you know, it's the kind of self-work that goes into having enough empathy to see these images, right? So, you guys want to answer a few questions in the time we have? An audience? All right. So do you have a favorite photo? This is an open question. Do you have a favorite photo that you've taken over the years? A favorite one that you...
They're all favorites. Who is your favorite child? Answer that one.
I think someone here has an answer too, you know.
I'm sure
Unfortunately.
they do. I'm sure they do.
Oh, there's also a mic, if anyone from the audience will have 2 mics.
I think the idea of their being your children and coming from you, they're all your children. You know? Mm-hmm. I mean, I have some favorite ones. I can think of ones that, you know, are favorite, but I think they're all, when you get to that point where you can do it, they're all favorite children. You treat them all the same.
Absolutely.
You love them all.
Absolutely.
one time I asked Barboza about, like, there was a few girls. I said, well, which one do you like better like that? And he said, well, that's like asking me, like, which flower do you like better, the gardenia or the rose? So I feel that way about photographs. It's like, you know, you like, it's like gardenia or a rose.
Yeah.
I have a question. First of all, thank you so much for your eyes.
Valerie Casella Oliver, curator, thank you.
Thank you so much for your eyes and for persevering. I'm so glad that we're here to this day to honor you and celebrate you. As this began in Virginia with Sarah Eckhart, digging deeply through the files of Louis Draper and his archives, I wonder if you could speak about Lou Draper and the role, who sadly passed away, the role of Lou Draper in Kamoinge. And as you said, you were a band. Everyone brought something to the table. And I wonder if you could speak to Lou and what he brought to the table.
I loved Lou Draper. He's the person that invited me into the group. And he said I was a good photographer. And, you know, he was the one word I was thinking about Lou the other day, and it was like he was selfless, and I think that's what his students really loved about him. He was just so genuine. But I also liked Lou Draper because he would tell me like little stories, like he had a crush on Lorraine Hansberry. And I was so fascinated by those kind of stories, the stories. He was, he just always came from, like, you could just feel his joy. And it was, it was, Black Panther movement, people were, but he always was just came from such a warm place with an understanding, and he had grace. And, he talked about the different, like he said, like the lines. If you look at lines were like kind of category. I mean, this little tiny things he would just drop on you, and just very giving. And and even actually, even though I was doing photography, I wasn't really, trying to have shows or anything like that. I kind of was doing other things, But his sister spoke at the Stephen Casher's, and I missed the opening because it was of Lou Draper's work, but she was going to speak, and so that's why I went. And that's how I started. I had a gallery. It was like his presence was there and brought me back into the museum world, let's say, gallery world. So it was Lou's spirit still leading me, even though he wasn't around.
I would say that Lou Draper was a very heart-centered person, and he was very, very giving. Kamoinge started before 1963, but it was Lou in '63 that said, we have these meetings and we're talking and discussing stuff and going back and forth, and he said, we better write some stuff down. And he started writing because he said, who wants to write? Everybody said, not me, man. I don't know. I ain't writing. I don't know how to write. And keep notes and everything. So we started recording ourselves. But then Lou started writing. And that's the only reason we have a history, a written history, is because Lou started taking and writing down what we were saying. He didn't write down the things like, fuck you. Take that photograph off the wall. That's bullshit, We had big back and forth about photographs, about whether it was good or not, man. No, man, some people that came into the group to join walked out with their head down because they got, criticized so heavily about their work. So the ones that went away and didn't come back, we said, okay, didn't come back. Like Jimmy came in first, and he told me, what is this? And yeah, right. So, is this? And Jimmy took his photograph, walked out, but he came back the next week. And he said, check that out. I said, hey, Jimmy, well, I'm not print now, man. But those were the people, the ones that came back. A lot of people came through Kamonge. A lot of people. A lot of very well-known African-American photographers. And see, even some white photographers came. But we told them, no, you got all these clubs. We got our one little club. Nah, man, you can't be. But I think the idea that guys came back, the ones that were rejected or the ones that walked out crying. There were several people were in tears. I mean, guys were hard on them, Those were hard times, You didn't have time to play around with, that's a cute picture, this, that. No, that doesn't work. The composition is bad. You don't know how to print. You didn't spot it. Why insult us by putting something on the wall that's like negative? Lou was always like very sweet. Oh, that's a very nice photograph. You should do this and shoot that. Lou Draper was the sweetheart. I was the bad boy. I was like, hey, get around. You can't print. I remember one time, Ming was frightened when I jumped up on the table and read everybody. Ming was like, oh, shit.
I didn't remember that.
It was
Really?
at Tony's studio. You told me you were afraid. That time I got him, I read everybody. When we said, we're going to break up. We're not going to stay together. And I jumped up on the table and said, no, that's because you did this and you did it. And Ming was like, because it was very important to me right from the beginning that we stay together. I said we can argue and we can fight, but the idea of us staying together is important because there's no other group like this. And Lou was the sweetheart guy.
Thank you. I think we have time for like one more question. Okay, sure. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you all for your work, first of all. I feel like you're all masters of the perfect moment, as much as Henri Cartier-Bresson or any of those names associated with that process. However, I do feel as an artist who's also a parent that the perfect moment street photography approach to art making is a very gendered approach. And I was wondering if, I guess this is specifically for Ming, if you ever felt like perhaps the playing field sort of wasn't the same necessarily. And I'm specifically thinking about the photographs of yours that have interventions of ink and paint and other approaches to or additions to the actual photograph. I'm wondering if that kind of stemmed from you finding a different way to express yourself or make your work that matched maybe, I'm presuming, I don't know, but there aren't a lot of female photographers with children who wander the streets until they find a great picture for hours and hours. So sometimes people like Imogen Cunningham go into the studio and shoot still lives, or I was just wondering where those interventions came from. Sorry for my projections.
First of all, what I was doing was bigger than anything, male, female. I had a greater purpose. It was like I was serving. I don't want to get spiritual, but I was following my spiritual self. And, with that, I don't think in terms of male, female, straight, gay, old, young. It's just, so that never was a conscious, I am a woman, so all of those feelings probably are in my work. But yeah, I think it was just, the purpose, and like I said before, the authenticity of being, the expression, the love of being a human being. And I looked at them, and the males, and in the art world, I don't really think about those things. And, I had a greater purpose, a bigger purpose, like cultural continuation. There's so, like the Black culture, it's like there's so many stereotypes and there's so much beauty in just working class people. There's great beauty and wealth in it. And, people who were like laid cement when I was growing up, just cement, or gardeners. My grandparents had a beautiful garden. They grew vegetables and flowers, and my grandfather planted the flowers, petunias, by the driveway, and he was a postal worker, and his father was a slave, and he married a Cherokee. It was like, they built their own garage. They were carpenters. They did beautiful work. My grandfather also painted houses. He painted, and he would take me as a little girl and show me about the trim of the house, and it was like 3 stories up, and but this was just like my one experience with my grandfather. But there's so many people, my friends, that grew up with really rich and even love stories. Like at one time I remember going to the movies, and there was nothing of our culture where really the love between us, the love stories, just the intimacy. And so with my work, that's what I wanted to capture, the beauty, the wealth, and the children, like, especially now even more so, it seems like they don't really understand they don't understand how rich they are, how beautiful they are, how their spirit and the sacrifice, and so basically those type of things I didn't really think about because I had a greater purpose.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So, everyone, if you get a chance, go see the exhibition. For me, it's profound, and enjoy your day, enjoy your time. Thank you for coming.